These are my ST-XTA coilovers with adjustable damping, which I was very excited about because it's a really nice feature to have. And what this me didn't know is that on these cars, you can actually access the adjustable damping feature because of that right there. For some reason, BMW thought it was a great idea to design the strut brace so that it went directly over the strut tower. I don't know, I've never seen a design like this. Let me know if you've seen other cars that are designed this way. Because of this design, no matter how hard you try, you cannot fit the little adjusting tool down into the damping adjustment, which means that you have to remove the strut brace just to adjust your damping, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but whenever you're out driving, that is inconvenient. So in my desperation, I spent hours looking for a different brace. Okay, that's a lie. I spent a few minutes. It really only took a couple minutes looking on forums to find out that the M3 brace has a totally different design. Instead of being fastened with a single bolt, it has a ring design, so that way all you have to do is remove this little black piece and then you have easy access to adjust your damping. However, if you look for this M3 strut brace online, you will come to find out that it is $900. 900 bucks for a flimsy strut brace. Okay, it's not that flimsy, but still. When I saw that, I said, surely there is a way I can do this cheaper. And come to find out, you can do it cheaper because the 1M brace sells for about $550 and it has a similar design with the way that it mounts to the strut tower. But one thing that I don't like about the 1M strut brace is that the way that it mounts on the firewall is different from the M3. You see, the M3 uses a solid bracket that the bolt goes through in the middle at the firewall. And this is super rigid and solid. But the 1M is just like the 135i in that it's two separate pieces that is then being pinched at the firewall by the bolt. Plus, E9X M3s are constantly being parted out, so it's pretty easy to come by these for cheap and much less than the 1M brace. Now, I will say that after I went to the trouble of buying this off of Marketplace, I went on eBay and looked. And why didn't I check eBay to begin with? I don't know, you live and you learn, but they are going for about $300 to $400 on eBay as well. And so that means that I didn't have to go all the way to this dude's, which it wasn't that far away, but I could have just had it shipped to my door. But the good news is, if you want to do the same mod, then you could spend the same amount that I spent. So that makes it a good comparison. But I will say this, if you are picking one of these up secondhand, make sure that you get one of these special nuts, which let me show you closer, okay? Can you see it? This is a well nut, I believe is the technical term for this. And it has threads like that extend past the actual shoulder of it. So that way it's able to get more thread engagement while still being able to fit inside of the bracket, which you'll see how that works in a minute. And the reason why I say you should make sure that you get these is because these are the most expensive nut I have ever seen, like legit. They are $12 a piece. Look at that, $12 a piece for that. So yeah, make sure you get your nuts because I unfortunately walked away without the nuts and then saw how expensive they were. Now apparently I'm not completely out of the woods yet with this install because the centerpiece may not actually be compatible with the 1 Series because of the fact that the firewall on the 1 Series could be a slightly different angle than the 3 Series. But all I can really do with that is just test fit it, try it, and go from there. So let's get started with the install. To start with, you're gonna have to remove a ton of plastic from this engine bay. So first, you've got these two little covers on each side, and one side has a wire attached to it, so you're gonna need to undo that clip and then undo the wire so that you can remove the cover. Then you need to undo these 8mm screws. And if your previous owner hadn't lost a third of your hardware on all these plastic bits, then you'd also have one there and there. And now you can take off the entire cabin air intake as well as the cowl. And now we have our beautiful strut braces. And to get rid of those, you're going to need to remove this cover with a flathead screwdriver. That's going to reveal a bolt that you need to remove, and it may look like it's a 14mm, but don't use a 14mm. Use an E18 external Torx socket, and if you don't have a set of these, I'll leave a link to some in the description. I made the mistake in the past, but it doesn't actually fit, so sometimes it's best to just use the proper tools. Then you've got a bolt that looks like an 11mm, but again, it's not. It's actually an E14 external torque socket. So you've got 2 of these bolts total, 1 on each strut tower. Now in order to actually install this, it needs to be in separate pieces, so let's do that real quick. There we go. And then if we look close at these two, we can see the angle of that right there and that right there is not the same. And it's especially noticeable if you press that together. You can see how these are not parallel to each other. So they should be parallel. So I already know that this isn't gonna fit, but I'm just gonna throw it on there just so y'all can see exactly what I'm talking about whenever it's actually mounted to the car. So as you can see, this is how the brace would be mounted, and then it doesn't actually line up. Now I will just say, as far as purchasable bolt-on options that are out there, there is a brand called HP Autosport that takes the M3 bracket, cuts them right here and here, and then welds it back at the right angle. And they do sell these for like 250 bucks. So if you had to go that route, you could. I would rather not, because 250 bucks is almost as much as I spent on the entire kit. So it doesn't really make sense to me to just ditch this. So I'm gonna do my best with what I've got here. But what I can do is I can heat it up where I wanna bend it at, put it in a vise, heat it up, and it'll be annealed enough to bend it without risking cracking it, but it won't be overheating it to where the temper's changed. And that's really important considering this is a structural component. So I'm gonna try my hand with that, and hopefully with some patience and a little bit of finesse, we'll be able to get this thing to fit like it should. All right, so it's the next day, and as you can tell, I am not in my normal environment here. That's because I don't have a bench vise, but fortunately, somebody that I know from church has one of these in his shop. So I came over here to do this little bit of a modification. So here's my setup here. So I've got it clamped with some pieces of wood here to keep it insulated. I've got a propane torch, very straightforward. I think I bought this one for like $15 from Lowe's. You can probably find them for the same or cheaper online. I bought this thermometer, infrared thermometer. So that's gonna be great for making sure that I have it the right temp. And then also got some vice grips in case if I need to do any twisting. And then I've got the pipe off of my jack, which fits perfectly. So that's what we got going on. Let's get started. I ended up heating it to about 480 degrees before I tried bending it, and it was more than enough to be able to bend it by hand. That was way easier than I thought. That's awesome. I'd say that each side took me probably about 5 to 10 minutes to get up to temp, so just be patient, take your time, don't rush. So I've got both sides with a preliminary bend, and the kind of eyeball test is looking pretty good. It might be a little shallow, but I'm waiting for this to cool down so I can go ahead and test fit it. All right, so we are getting a little bit better, but still pretty far off. So back to the vise it goes. So really, I ended up bending this a little bit more than I thought I would have to. And then also to compensate for the change in the angle, I also needed to twist each side so that it actually matched up to the cross member so I could bolt it in place. And at this point, I was starting to feel pretty good about it. I was starting to see that this might actually just work. Y'all, I'm freaking hyped. It fits. It fits perfectly. All of the bolts are completely seated. So this is post bending, and as you can see, the angle is pretty different from what it was. And the main thing I want to look for, just to be, safe, is I want to look at the surface of the material itself to make sure that I'm not getting any cracks, because that's one thing that aluminum is prone to doing.
but that's why I heated it up, which that's called annealing. That makes the aluminum more malleable so that you can form it and bend it. And so I'm not seeing any cracks or stress fractures or anything on the surface of the material.
So in order to install the centerpiece, you're first going to need to remove the heater closing panel with these two 10mm screws. And to make it easier to get this little panel out, go ahead and remove your right windshield wiper by undoing the 16mm nut. And it was stuck on there pretty good, so I went ahead and just sprayed a little bit of PB Blaster. Then you can easily separate the majority of this piece from the base of the windshield. That gives you a lot of space to go ahead and pull out the heater closing panel. And just a quick note on this heater closing panel, if your kit didn't come with an M3 one and you're reusing your stock one, you're probably going to need to modify it just a little bit. And then the way that it mounts on the strut tower is with the actual hardware for your coilover. So you're going to need to go ahead and remove all three of those nuts and replace them with those special $12 nuts that I was talking about earlier. Then you can go ahead and land the cross member and tighten up the hardware. So next little modification that's needed is this right here is interfering. I ground off the stud and there's still a little bit of an interference here. So I'm gonna have to keep going down on the nuts just a little. I ground down the stud and the nut pretty far. You can tell pretty substantially shorter than it was. And then that wasn't quite enough. I didn't want to go any shorter on the nut, so I also just sanded this down. And now it fits. And lastly, you just got these two little black cover pieces that nicely cover up the strut tower, and you're done. So there you have it, M3 strut brace on the 135i. I'm super excited that this actually worked and that I didn't have to buy anything special. And honestly, like, I'm really happy with the fact that I was able to spend only $300, except for the, the little nut incident there. But aside from that, 300 bucks, got an M3 strut brace. And now look at how easy it is. You just pop that off, put it back on. So that's gonna be super nice for whenever I go to the Tail of the Dragon later this year, because I like to go up to the Tail of the Dragon with the soft settings, because it's kind of like a road trip. And then once I get there, I'll put it on the firm settings. And side note, Tail of the Dragon, if any of you guys want to go to the Tail of the Dragon, let me know, because I'd love to host a little get together or something at the Tail of the Dragon sometime this summer. So yeah, comment down below if that's something that you would be interested in. So that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know if you give this a shot, and keep joyriding.